Hi, this is Andre. Thanks for checking out Synthisophy. Synthisophy is scientifically integrating the wisdoms of history, based on fact and truth, into our present culture. Let's take a look today, Chapter 12, Modern Crises. Note that the following will be almost all direct quotes from the book Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging by Sebastian Junger, other than a few comments added here and there. The one thing that might be said for societal collapse is that, for a while at least, everyone is equal. In 1915, an earthquake killed 30,000 people in Avezzano, Italy, in less than a minute. The worst hit areas had a mortality rate of 96%. The rich were killed along with the poor. Virtually everyone who survived was immediately thrust into the most basic struggle for survival. They needed food, they needed water, they needed shelter, and they needed to rescue the living and bury the dead. In that sense, plate tectonics under Avezzano managed to recreate the communal conditions of our evolutionary past quite well. An earthquake achieves what the law promises but does not maintain, the equality of men, one of the survivors wrote. Regarding the bombing of London during World War II, 8 million men, women, and children in Greater London endured the kind of aerial bombardment that even soldiers are rarely subjected to. Often the badly wounded were just given morphine and left to die in the rubble, while rescue crews moved on to people they thought they could save. On and on the horror went, people dying in their homes or neighborhoods while doing the most mundane things. Not only did these experiences fail to produce mass hysteria, it didn't even trigger much individual psychosis. Before the war, projections of psychiatric breakdown in England ran as high as 4 million people. But as the Blitz progressed, psychiatric hospitals around the country saw admissions go down. Psychiatrists watched in puzzlement as long-standing patients saw their symptoms subside during the period of intense air raids. Voluntary admissions to psychiatric wards noticeably declined. Even epileptics reported having fewer seizures. To continue, sociologist Charles Fritz in the 1950s and 60s did studies on how communities respond to calamity. He was unable to find a single instance where communities that had been hit by catastrophic events lapsed into sustained panic, much less anything approaching anarchy. If anything, he found that social bonds were reinforced during disasters, and that people overwhelmingly devoted their energies toward the good of the community rather than just themselves. This same kind of response took place, if you recall, by people in southeast Texas and Florida during Hurricanes Harvey and Irma back in 2017. Fritz's theory is that modern society has greatly disrupted the social bonds that have always characterized the human experience, and that disasters thrust people back into a more ancient, organic way of relating. Disasters, he proposed, create a community of sufferers that allows individuals to experience an immensely reassuring connection to others. As people come together to face an existential threat, Fritz found, class differences are temporarily erased, income disparities become irrelevant, race is overlooked, and individuals are assessed simply by what they are willing to do for the group. It is a kind of fleeting social utopia that, Fritz felt, is enormously gratifying to the average person and downright therapeutic to people suffering from mental illness. Fritz's conclusions were later borne out in a study of the city of Yungay in central Chile. This city was struck by a devastating earthquake and rock slide on May 31st, 1970. 90% of the population of Yungay died almost instantly, and 70,000 people were killed throughout the region, roughly equivalent to a nuclear strike on that area. The rock slide that buried the city put so much dust in the air that helicopters couldn't land, and survivors of Yungay were left completely on their own for days. Into this terrifying vacuum, a new social order quickly sprang up. concepts of individual private property temporarily submerged, anthropologist Anton Oliver Smith wrote in his paper, Brotherhood of Pain. The crisis also had an immediate status-leveling effect on the nascent community of survivors it had created. A sense of brotherhood prevailed as Indian and Mestizo, lower and upper class, collaborated in the collective efforts to obtain immediate necessities and survive. As soon as the relief flights began delivering aid to the area, class divisions returned and the sense of brotherhood disappeared. The modern world had arrived. If there are phrases that characterize the life of our early ancestors, community of sufferers and brotherhood of pain surely must come close. Their lives were probably less labor-intensive lives than in modern society, as demonstrated by the Khon tribe in South African deserts as late as the 1970s. But the mortality rate would have been much higher. The advantages of group cooperation would include far more effective hunting and defense, and groups that failed to function cooperatively must have gradually died out. What catastrophes seem to do, sometimes in the span of a few minutes, is turn back the clock on 1,000,000 years of social evolution. Self-interest gets subsumed into group interest because there is no survival outside of group survival. That genetically evolved and chemically existent tribal instinct is revealed, and that creates a bond that many people sorely miss. Where else could this tribal instinct be reflected in modern society? Let's go to chapter 13.